Kevin Hasser, and I am part of the grants team at the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development. I'm going to refer to it as DSLBD for the rest of our time together. And today we're going to be looking at the FY25 Ward 6 grant competition. The applications are currently open for that opportunity, and that's going to close on April 14th of 2025 at 2 p.m. So you'll definitely need to submit your application before that time. What we're going to cover today is an introduction to DSLBD as well as our mission. We'll take a brief overview of the DC Main Streets program, and why we'll do that is because this opportunity, the Ward 6 opportunity, is directly linked to that program, so it's important to have an understanding of both. As an interested applicant, we'll take a look at overall eligibility and what it takes to create an application, as well as your program budget. And then once the application is turned in, we'll do a brief overview of what the panel process could look like, or as a potential and hopeful grantee, what that process may look like in terms of receiving award notifications and a potential project year. The request for application, or RFA, is linked at the hyperlink right there. It is also on our DSLBD opportunities page, and we cannot encourage you enough to read through this document. You will not be able to submit a successful application without reviewing the document in full, and nothing that occurs on this workshop is meant to replace that RFA. And in fact, if there's any conflict between the RFA and this workshop, then the RFA will prevail. So again, we cannot encourage you enough to read through that document. It will be imperative for you to do so to submit a successful application. Please do so. DSLBD's mission and vision, as the name implies, is exclusively focused on the benefit of the small business landscape and environment in the District of Columbia, to create an environment that's conducive to them to thrive, to grow, and to recruit new businesses into the district and help sustain the entrepreneurs who want to grow their own operations within DC. DSLBD does that through a variety of different teams. Today we're going to be focusing on the commercial revitalization team at the top of that slide. Revitalization is focused on providing services and funding that help the retail corridors, as we've identified, around the District of Columbia. We do that primarily through these three programs: the Main Streets program, the Business Improvement Districts, or BIDs, as well as the Clean Teams initiative. Taking a look at Main Street specifically, as of this moment, DC has 29 designated Main Street corridors that we're estimating serve greater than 4,000 brick and mortar retail shops across all 8 wards in most neighborhoods across the District of Columbia. Each one of these Main Streets provides invaluable funding, technical assistance to small businesses, as well as events and other activities that again create that conducive, business positive environment for small businesses to thrive. Some of the goals of the DC Main Street are obviously to maintain that positive environment for small businesses, to help mitigate their challenges, and then also to be local representatives of the National Main Street America movement, which is a collective of main streets in rural, urban, and suburban areas all across the country. This year in FY25, DSLBD received some additional funding specifically to support DC Main Street corridors in Ward 6 and the businesses along those corridors. That includes retailers, restaurants, the neighbors who patron them. Some of the events that may come from some of these opportunities can include vacant storefront activations, events, arts, cultural programming, and even direct-to-business subgrants, all of them in support of the broader DC business environment. There are 2 eligible project types for this grant. We'll identify them in the next 2 slides. As an interested applicant, you can apply for both opportunities if you so chose. However, it's imperative that the 2 opportunities, your 2 applications, if you choose to do so, are unique. They cannot be part of each other. It cannot be the same project repeated. Each one of those projects, in order to be eligible, needs to be unique. 2 project types are activation and events. As an interested applicant, you'll need to propose a project that costs between $5,000 and $20,000. What this is are smaller scale projects that advocate, that connect, that promote, and support commerce and partnerships of small business, retailers, restaurants, and neighbors along, again, these Ward 6 Main Street corridors. Some ideas for some of the projects could include activating a vacant storefront, or hosting an event, or maybe some arts or cultural programming. The projects for this category can either be discrete one-time events, or it can be part of a series of events. So again, as an interested applicant, you would be seeking a project that would cost between $5,000 and $20,000. And because of that funding range, DSLBD intends to award between 5 and 10 grants in this category. The second and larger project is the place-based stabilization and sustainability project. As an interested applicant here, you would be proposing a project that is going to cost between $75,000 and $250,000. And so to that end, these proposals would be much more comprehensive, innovative, and impactful, but again with the same goals: to advocate, to connect, to promote and support commerce and partnerships with small businesses, retailers, restaurants, and neighbors. Some ideas for some of these kinds of projects could be just direct business subgrants along each one of the eligible corridors, to leverage capital and decrease vacancies, or provide bridge funding to support businesses, or some other similar idea that would improve business, resident, or visitor experiences along the Ward 6 DC Main Street's corridors. So again, as an interested applicant, you would be assembling a project that you imagine would cost between $75,000 and $250,000. And because of the size of the award in this category, DSLBD intends to award between 1 to 3 grants in this particular category. In order to propose a successful project within your application, it's imperative to know what regions are eligible within Ward 6. And so we'll take a look at the 3 eligible main streets within Ward 6 in the following. The first on the list is Barracks Row. We provided a map here on the right for you to see. It is bounded by roughly by Pennsylvania Avenue in the northern portion, and it extends down to M Street southeast in the southern portion. We also have a written description of the Barracks Row neighborhood and the businesses included therein on the left-hand side. The second region is Eastern Market Main Street, which you can see on the map there again on the right. It kind of overlaps on Pennsylvania Avenue and goes over to 6th Street and roughly between 6th Street and then 8th Street as well. Again, that written description is there on the left. And the third region is the H Street Main Street. H Street Main Street is an interesting corridor. It actually extends beyond Ward 6 into both Wards 5 and Ward 7. However, for the purposes of this grant, only the Ward 6 portion of H Street is eligible for funding and eligible for projects. And that would be the formal traditional H Street neighborhood itself, which stretches from roughly 3rd Street to 15th Street, as the map indicates there on the right. If you propose a project that is a part of H Street Main Street but falls outside of this specific corridor, then that would not be an eligible project. All right, speaking of eligibility, let's take a look at that and what it takes to create an application. Eligibility is fairly simple. Take a look at this bulleted list here and ensure that you meet all of these qualities. You'll also be asked these same questions when you log into our online Zoom Grants portal to draft and submit your application. We do not accept emailed applications. We don't accept written applications. Every eligible application must be submitted through the Zoom Grants portal. In order to be eligible, you must be an active DC-based 501c3 nonprofit organization that is fully compliant with all district and federal agencies, some of which are indicated on that list. You also need to be able to provide all required documentation, including your financial documentation, as you'll find within the application. You have to propose an eligible project, and you have to complete all of this by the deadline on April 14th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Also, if your organization, if your executive director, or if any officers within your organization have been suspended from a DSLBD grant within the last 5 years, then you would not be eligible to apply. But if you have questions about that, please reach out. Speaking of the application, you can get access to it on this hyperlink here through the Zoom Grants portal. It is also directly linked within the RFA. And we encourage you either to log in or to create an account. If you are a returning applicant, if you have already applied for an opportunity through DC or DSLBD Zoom grants, then you already have an account on file. Feel free to log in again. And if not, then please create an account starting down here. What you can expect to see when you log in is making sure that you see the Ward 6 DC Main Street Support Grant opportunity as indicated on this slide. If you see that, then you'll know that you're in the right place. If you scroll down, you're going to want to confirm that your information here is correct. It's going to ask you for the overall amount requested. Again, we try to clarify the two different amounts that you might be able to request, or the two different ranges within which you can make your request for your project funding. This is one of a few places that you'll have to indicate a budget number. It's important in your final application that those budget numbers are consistent from location to location. But also within this eligibility page, you'll just want to confirm the accuracy of your information here to make sure that you created your account correctly. Also on the eligibility page are these required documents. You'll see them indicated in this table here. Most of these documents are all required. The only one that's not required is an audited financial statement, because there are many organizations that have never had to achieve one and are not at the funding threshold in order to draft one. However, if you do have a recent audited financial statement, then we do require that you include that. So please do so. Once you upload those documents, you'll see each one of those files populate here. I have not uploaded any of them in my draft application, and so you'll see them all indicated as none. And then down here at the bottom of the screen, it's a really helpful navigational tool to guide you through the application. It should save automatically as you go from page to page. However, that doesn't always happen when there are timeouts, and so we urge you to prepare all of your materials offline in advance. Do not put your draft language exclusively in this application. Don't type directly into the application. Please, we can't encourage you enough. Please use an offline drafting tool, either a Word document or some other form, to create your application. The worst situation is when people lose their documents and their language because of a timeout issue. All right, continue on to the application. You'll see at the very top that there is an opportunity both to indicate which kind of project you're seeking to apply for, whether it's activation and events or stabilization and sustainability. And then again, also indicate where you're imagining these projects are going to occur. You can select one or more of the 3 eligible DC Main Streets. So you'll definitely need to do that before going into the overall application itself, which is about 25 questions, some of them asking for very short, perfunctory things, narratives, narrative codes about your DLCP license number, and some of them being longer narratives so that you can more fully describe what your project entails. That's pretty much the extent of the overall application, at least from a compliance and a narrative perspective. However, let's continue on into the overall program budget. Before we take a look at the budget form itself, we do have some budgetary restrictions, and this is across all of our funding opportunities. First of all, it's important to note that all DSLBD funds, if they are received, if you end up being a grantee, need to be expensed by the end of this fiscal year. For us, that is September 30th of 2025. And we'll address that again a little bit later in the slide deck. All grant funds need to be budgeted and used according to the specific thresholds and according to the way that you are designing it within your application. They cannot be used, regardless of what you indicate in the application. They cannot be used for several things as indicated on this list: board compensation, food and beverages, donations to nonprofit organizations, everything else that you would read on that list. Finally, concluding with any expenses deemed disallowed by DSLBD. When we do disallow expenses, it's never a surprise. We talk about it extensively. But essentially, if your application budget is approved, then it is a good guidance for what you can expect for the overall project. Taking a look at the budget form within the application, unlike some of our other programs, this budget form is actually hard-coded into the application itself. And so you'll see on the left-hand side, there are options for you to clarify each one of your budget expense items. We've ghosted a couple of the options that are here. And then on the right-hand side, to provide clarity on what those top-line figures are expected to be. It doesn't provide a whole lot of depth. You will have other opportunities within the application. I'll point out one of them in the following slide. To talk about this budget, and that context is going to be important in translating and transferring, all of your knowledge for this particular project. But at least for the entering of the budget items here, again, on the left-hand side, you're just going to pick the budget category for your expense, and on the right-hand side, you're going to enter those numbers. One item of note, one of these expense categories of note, is something that we call the nonprofit indirect rate. And that is standard for all district grants now going to nonprofit organizations. And that is essentially a 10% portion of the grant that is eligible to be allocated towards your indirect expenses, towards your operating expenses, essentially. If you have questions about what that is or how to apply it, then please feel free to reach out. But just know that you are able to apply 10% of your overall project budget towards your indirect operating expenses as a nonprofit organization. So we encourage all applicants to take advantage of that 10% and to consider that 10% as you're drafting your overall budget amount. Down here at the bottom of this budget table, you'll see one of those opportunities. This is actually a narrative box down here at the bottom of the page to provide essential context and clarity towards your budget. I think I would always encourage applicants to take the full use to talk about their budget in any way that you can to provide clarity and anticipate questions that others may have when looking at the budget that you're creating, because again, you won't be able to provide that context within the table above. You'll just have top-line budget categories and then total amounts. So probably you will want to share more of that context with the panelists who are going to be evaluating your application. And then in the next portion of the application is actually the final portion, which is the additional documents, as indicated here. There are 3 additional documents. Only one of them is required. It's the biographies of the people who are going to be working on this project. Everybody has at least one person who's going to be working on the project, whether that be an internal or external person. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. Well, you're required to take advantage of that. But then additionally, you have 2 additional opportunities to provide some more contextual information for what your project may entail. If you have anything that may be of use to the panelists to help evaluate or envision what it is that you're trying to describe. And then some additional budget documentation as well, if you think that is helpful to share with the panelists. That could be invoices or estimates, or any number of other things that you think might provide that additional budgetary clarity to someone who may be exposed to your kind of project for the very first time. So you've submitted your application. What happens next? The SLBD's timeline is that we will try to review these applications as soon as possible. The applications are going to be due again on April 14th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Review panels will take place in the next 2 weeks. There will be at least 2 panels, one for each project type. Within our panels, we try to select independent panels, folks who are around the DC area, who have experience and background in the kinds of projects you're trying to propose, maybe have some broader experience in the communities that are being worked with. We try to get a diverse group of folks who bring a variety of different skill sets to the table. This is the scoring criteria that they'll be applying, and again, you'll be able to find this document within the RFA as well. This is the attachment B document within your RFA. And so while you are writing your narratives, we cannot encourage you enough to write towards these criteria. This is exactly what the panelists will be looking for when they are reading your narratives and looking at your attached documents. And this is the weight with which they will apply each one of these considerations. So take a look at that RFA, make sure that you have a copy of that attachment B with you as you're drafting your narratives, and do your best to answer each one of these questions as you're drafting out your project proposal for someone to read. Considering notification and awards, hopefully you end up receiving an award. What would that look like? We're going to try to make award announcements no later than May 9th of 2025. And with that announcement, you can expect either a grant package or a letter of ineligibility or, unfortunately, a letter of denial. If you end up receiving a grant package, there will be some further instructions and maybe some further conversation codifying your overall eligible budget, making sure that we have everything recorded correctly so that we can actually make an eligible award. And then following that notification of grant award, which happens with that budget, then we'll extend a grant agreement that will require some further proof of documentation like insurance or your board roster, signed conflict of interest statements, and such things. All of that information needs to be returned to DSLBD as soon as possible so that we can issue you the first disbursement of your award. What the grant and the project year can expect to look like. Award announcement is anticipated for May. However, the spending needs to be completed at the end of September. And so these projects are going to be confined to a highly truncated fiscal year. We cannot encourage you enough to consider that as you are drafting your application. And try to be realistic about what you can propose within these finite few months. There are always complications from delays and with vision, and so please consider that timeline as you are drafting your application. Once the awards are issued, then we have no choice but to hold tight to that deadline, and so consider what it would look like to realize that plan as well. For the higher award amounts, it's possible that grant funding may be delivered in multiple disbursements pending the proof of eligible spending. We're still figuring out what that threshold is. For the smaller award amounts, it is very likely that the full award will be given in a single disbursement, however, still with that expense tracking throughout the project year. DSLBD, speaking of, requires a couple of tracking documents. First of all, we will be in touch with you. We want to hear your successes and your challenges with the project. Second of all, we do require tracking of invoices and receipts. We do that through our PES digital platform, which we'll share with you. We will verify the eligibility of all of those expenses. And then in a final report, we also have an additional platform to track qualitative and quantitative feedback for your project's overall evolution and success. Some tips and general advice. Again, we strongly encourage you to draft your responses and your narrative outside of the portal before plugging it all in. Please start working on collecting your required documentation now. Some of that stuff is outside of your control, and so it requires some advanced work in order to meet that stringent application close deadline. When it's possible, we encourage you to upload a PDF instead of any other file type. And then reach out to folks. Reach out to folks to get a third opinion or a second opinion or whatever you can on the content. Try to anticipate some questions that outsiders may have towards your content. We find that's a pretty successful strategy for preparing the panelists to receive some of your proposals. To that end, we also encourage you to avoid things like grant speak, which are oftentimes extra superlatives that you or your organization or your proposal might be the best or worst or greatest at doing something. Oftentimes that superlative doesn't matter as much as just the metrics and the description of what it is that you're trying to do. And so those are just a couple of general tips and pointers that we have to put your best foot forward in this application process. There are many, many others. And so again, you'll collect those as you reach out to other folks and try to get some additional opinions and feedback on your proposal. And that brings us to the conclusion of this session. So if there's anything else that you want to ask us, please feel free to reach out. You can reach me at dc.mainstreets@dc.gov. We encourage you to do so. Please send us an email. We'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. And best of luck in your application. We hope everybody is successful.